I'm a huge fan of the open world RPG genre, and over the last few decades, I have watched the genre evolve like no other. If you're someone who appreciates the genre as much as me, well, here's something to get you guys excited. Crimson Desert is all set for a release on the 19th of March 2026. And this game, developed and published by Pearl Abyss, was originally planned as a prequel to Black Desert Online. Now, my expectations are high because of all the hype around this game, which is already being marketed as the most anticipated open world game of 2026. And those who have enjoyed Black Desert should surely keep their eye out for this one. So, in this video, I will explore some of the details that you must know about before you get your hands at this one.
Well, a land soaked in blood by the battles of those who seek peace.
What is Crimson Desert, the foundation of the game? My first question about the game was what really sets it apart from its older sibling Black Desert? Well, for starters, Crimson Desert is built as a story-driven single-player experience with its own narrative universe rather than a multiplayer MMO. You play as Cliff, the leader of the Greymanes, a band of mercenaries who've been devastated by a brutal ambush from the Black Bears, their sworn enemies. The story follows Cliff as he journeys across the sprawling continent of Pywell to locate his scattered comrades, rebuild the fallen Greymanes, and ultimately save the land from an impending catastrophe. This narrative-focused approach is actually a deliberate shift from what was originally planned, and it fundamentally shapes how the game plays out. The developers wanted to create something with robust storytelling and meaningful action sequences that you couldn't achieve in a traditional MMO format. Release date and platform availability. Crimson Desert is officially launching on March 19, 2026, and it's coming simultaneously to 3 major platforms: PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and Series S, and PC via Steam. There's also a Mac version mentioned with Apple M1 or better specifications, though that's less talked about in most coverage. The game is available for pre-order right now across all platforms, and Pearl Abyss has given us 3 edition options. The standard edition comes in at $69.99 and includes the base game plus pre-order bonuses. The deluxe edition is $89.99 and adds exclusive DLC items like Balgrin Shield, Exclair Horse Tack Set, and Kairos Plate Set, plus physical goodies like a cloth map and Steelbook if you go physical. Then there's the collector's edition at $279.99, which is absolutely loaded with premium goodies including an exclusive 17-inch diorama of Cliff and Golden Star, a Greymane brooch pin, and a woven fabric map of Pywell. The evolution of Black Desert to Crimson Desert. Now, this is something that really fascinates me about Crimson Desert's development. The game originally started as a prequel expansion to Black Desert Online back in 2019, but the development team completely reimagined it into something entirely different. They were working on what would essentially be another MMO, but around 2020, Pearl Abyss made a massive decision to scrap that direction and transform it into a single-player experience with its own unique story and world. However, what they didn't scrap was the technology. Crimson Desert uses an upgraded version of Black Desert's engine called the Black Space Engine, which is the reason this game looks absolutely jaw-dropping. You can see the DNA of Black Desert's design and how systems work, the feel of combat, and even in certain gameplay mechanics, but everything has been streamlined and optimized specifically for a single-player narrative experience without the grinding and progression systems that typically plague MMOs. Now, I don't know about you, but this is enough incentive for me to get my hands on this game. The world of Pywell, scale and design. The continent of Pywell is genuinely massive and incredibly diverse. Based on developer information, the map is approximately 60 square kilometers, which for reference is about the size of Stalker 2's world and roughly half the size of The Witcher 3. Pywell is designed to feel absolutely lived in and layered with centuries of lore. The continent stretches from icy northern highlands down to scorched southern deserts, and every region has completely distinct geography, culture, and atmosphere. You've got Quaidan, the harsh frozen northern homeland where Cliff originates, with snow-capped mountains and brutal terrain. Then there's Acapan forests and plains, which offers a more temperate landscape. The barren desert is exactly what it sounds like, but it houses an ancient cult venerating a forgotten deity. Beyond that, you've got the Land of the Wolf, the Land of the Prophets, and various rocky desert regions. The cities each have their own identity shaped by geography and history. There's the desert capital of Spareth, built literally on the bones of an ancient empire, gleaming with gold and redstone, but hiding corruption beneath the surface. Other notable settlements include Hernand, Grace, and various castles and outposts scattered throughout. Now, I'm really intrigued by how this combination of scale and density makes Pywell feel like an actual continent rather than just a playground. Combat system. Fighting game meets Dark Souls. I've realized that Pearl Abyss drew inspiration from retro arcade games like Samurai Showdown, Final Fight, and King of Fighters to create something genuinely unique in the open-world RPG space. Crimson Desert combines complex, chained melee combos with a surprising amount of depth and variety. You're weaving together kicks, grapples, strong slices, leaping attacks, and suplex moves, all of which can be combined in different ways depending on your weapon and ability choices. The fluidity matters too. Each blow carries real impact, both when you're dealing damage and when you're receiving it. One of the cooler mechanics is how environmental context affects your combat options. You can transition from aiming a bow into a dodge roll to trigger a brief window of slow motion, like a medieval Matrix moment. Perfect for scoring a headshot. You can cast spells at the apex of a jump to launch yourself into the air, and do it twice more to climb even higher. The combat tree is massively expandable, meaning there are tons of ways to approach fights beyond just melee versus ranged. Some players might focus on sword combat with elemental magic integration, others might lean into grappling and stunning, and others might specialize in ranged combat with buffs. Pearl Abyss even included battle mechs equipped with thrusters, machine guns, homing rockets, and EMP blasts as environmental tools you can pilot, though these are carefully balanced into the campaign's power curve so they don't completely trivialize encounters. The real emphasis seems to be on impact and tactical flexibility rather than just speed, and I am in love with the prospect of this. Non-combat activities and life skills. Beyond intense combat, Crimson Desert is packed with an enormous variety of non-combat activities that feel genuinely meaningful to the experience. We're talking about fishing, where you can cast a line in rivers, lakes, and seas using different fishing rods, with your catches providing food, buffs, or trade goods. There's also cooking, which lets you prepare dishes from ingredients you gather or hunt, and these meals can provide crucial buffs for your adventures. Herbalism and gathering allows you to collect materials from the environment. You can tame wild horses and train them as mounts, with increasing your training level, unlocking better bonuses and skills for your companions. There's climbing, and this seems to be a genuine exploration tool rather than just visual, letting you scale ruins, towers, and cliff faces to bypass obstacles or reach secret areas. Hunting takes you into the wilderness to track down creatures for resources and rewards. You can pet dogs, cats, and even rats as companions. There's also trading, where you buy and sell goods through trade managers at nodes and towns, with prices fluctuating based on supply and demand. Mining and farming are there too, along with arm wrestling minigames, hot air balloon riding, dragon riding, and even pipe playing. Developers also mentioned puzzles on floating islands and telekinesis-based puzzle solving. I can already tell that I'll be spending hours on this one. Multiplayer and online elements. Pearl Abyss confirmed that alongside the 50 to 80 hours of single-player story content, there's a multiplayer component in development. They're describing it as being similar in structure to Grand Theft Auto's multiplayer mode. Basically, a separate multiplayer experience that extends the lifespan of the game with live service features. The developers stated that single-player and multiplayer are organically intertwined, meaning you can move between them seamlessly without loading screens, and items and progression from single-player carry over to multiplayer and vice versa. The multiplayer will feature cosmetic purchases, weapon skins, and other cosmetics, but there's a strong suggestion that the single-player experience will remain free of aggressive microtransaction systems, which is honestly refreshing for me. Pearl Abyss seemed to have learned from Black Desert Online's sometimes contentious monetization reputation. The seamless world design means you might stumble into multiplayer zones or encounter other players while exploring, and you can choose to cooperate or compete. However, multiplayer is launching post-release, so at launch you're getting the full single-player story first. Technical details and PC requirements. From a technical standpoint, Crimson Desert is using Pearl Abyss's new Black Space engine, which is basically an upgraded version of Black Desert's already impressive engine. The visual fidelity is genuinely impressive across all platforms, with particular emphasis on next-gen capabilities for PS5 and Xbox Series X. For PC players, here are your requirements you need to know. The minimum specs to run the game at 1280 by 720 on very low settings requires an Intel Core i5 8500 or AMD Ryzen 5 2600X, 16 gigs of RAM, and a minimum of a GTX 1060 or RX 6500 XT. For those aiming for 1080p gaming on medium settings, you'll need an Intel Core i5 10600K or an AMD Ryzen 5 3600X with 16 gigs of RAM and at least an RTX 2060 or an RX 6600 XT. All versions require a minimum of 100 gigs of free SSD space and DirectX support for your GPU, which is standard for most modern games. The game supports DLSS and other upscaling technologies to help with performance across various hardware configurations. Hands-on impressions. What feels great? From various hands-on previous sessions at events like Gamescom, Summer Game Fest, and other outlets, there's a lot of genuine enthusiasm about what Crimson Desert achieves. The first thing critics consistently praise is the raw visual spectacle. The Black Space engine truly shines with dynamic lighting, detailed environmental destruction, realistic cloth and hair physics, and weather effects that actually impact gameplay. Snow affects how enemies move, wind affects how vegetation reacts, and particle effects carry real visual weight. The combat feels incredible when it clicks. The impact of each strike, the visual feedback from elemental effects, the way characters move through the environment. It all comes together to create deeply satisfying battles. One hands-on player bypassed an entire burning choke point by grappling up a tower, gliding across a gap, and creating an alternate route, which speaks to the environmental design rewarding creative thinking. The boss encounters themselves seem genuinely challenging and engaging, with multiple phases that require different strategies and crowd control tactics to progress through. The world feels alive, with NPCs going about their business, dynamic events occurring, and a sense of consequence to the choices and events you encounter. Concerns and issues from preview play. Well, praises aside, the game is good and all, but it's not at all perfect, and I think it's important to be honest about the concerns that have emerged from hands-on play. The control scheme is honestly quite complicated. Pearl Abyss is trying to cram a massive variety of abilities and moves onto a gamepad, and there's a noticeable lag between your button presses and the actual execution of actions. Some players describe feeling like their inputs were one step behind the action, as if Cliff has to think about your command before executing it. This likely stems from the system needing to process complex button combinations to distinguish different moves, like making sure an X press doesn't get confused with an X plus A combo. While this creates depth, it also means new players will struggle. There's also the issue of visual overwhelming in group combat. When multiple enemies are attacking or casting spells, the screen becomes absolutely packed with particle effects and visual noise, making it genuinely difficult to read incoming attacks. Some players noted that after a significant playtime, they could probably adjust to it, but it's definitely a concern for clarity and responsiveness. But then, no game can be flawless, can it? Difficulty, boss fights, and accessibility. Crimson Desert's boss fights appear to be genuinely challenging, especially if you're playing on higher difficulties. The Stag Lord, for instance, which seemed to be featured prominently in early demos, has multiple distinct phases that require different strategies. For instance, at Phase 1, you can interrupt his charge attacks with almost any crowd control ability. At Phase 2, it becomes more restrictive, only allowing specific higher CC skills like Shield Bash or Turning Slash to interrupt him. At Phase 3, the only way to stop his charge is through the Force Palm ability. This escalating difficulty within boss encounters creates a learning curve where players need to adapt their tactics. There is no word yet on difficulty settings or accessibility options, which is something players are hoping Pearl Abyss addresses before launch, given that the control complexity and visual density could be challenging for certain players. Story and character development. I've already given you a basic gist of the narrative, but the story goes deeper than just personal revenge. There's something much larger at play involving ancient mysteries, temporal rifts, and a library called Providence that houses records of different realms. Sky Islands appear to be connected to time dungeons, and there are suggestions of events that have fundamentally changed Pywell's political and magical landscape. The game weaves together multiple narrative threads: the civil unrest in various kingdoms, the comatose king of Demenis, rival mercenary factions, ancient cults, and Cliff's personal journey all interconnect. From developer commentary, the story seems designed to have genuine emotional consequences, where characters' actions impact relationships, and sometimes allies might turn against you or be lost permanently. Marvelous verdict. Should you buy? So, after everything I've just covered, is Crimson Desert worth buying? Honestly, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want a deeply engaging action RPG with genuinely impressive combat depth, a massive world to explore with meaningful activities, and you're willing to invest time in learning a complex control scheme, then Crimson Desert absolutely seems worth your money. Pearl Abyss has created something that feels fresh in the open-world action RPG space by combining arcade fighting game sensibilities with an expansive world. Based on everything I've researched and analyzed, Crimson Desert is shaping up to be a genuinely ambitious and impressive title that could define 2026's action RPG landscape. The question now is whether you're ready for the challenge and investment it demands. Well, let me know your thoughts on the comment section about this one and whether you think this game is worth buying. And I'll see you on our next video.